Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. It's finally time to be here with Jael again. We're going to be meeting every Friday, so you can look forward to that. Hi, Jael. What do you got for us? It's our gender and astrology talk, of course.
Hey,
I
today I
just want you
thought
to know I'm
we
being femme
could.
today. Do I look very femme today?
Oh yeah, you're killing it. You look
Yeah, well,
very
my chart's
beautiful.
not always very femme, but right now the Pisces moon is getting hit, so I figured I could put on my femme.
Yeah, it's giving. I feel like you're looking a little like flush in the face in a like nice way, in a feminine way, right? I always think of like the apple cheeks or something. It's good.
Yeah, I figured the glitter top, the big earrings, and the hair down with lipstick would be femme enough.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, killing
So
it.
gender is a performance, That's what I learned when I was studying queer theory.
What? I
Good
mean,
stuff.
that's true. Let's have a little side quest before I start on what I was going to say. Because you said gender's performance, um, that I think is like one of the most highly misunderstood and debated ideas that came from gender ideology. Partially because when Judith Butler said that gender is a performance, she was specifically talking about performance in the academic philosophical sense, which is like its own um, meaning that I'm not even gonna get into because it's almost like too boring. But um, the point is, sorry, that it goes to this idea of it being a social construct, and people use that in two different ways. Either by saying it's a social construct, so it's not real, and then using that as like a dismissive thing, or saying it's a social construct, so it's not real, which means that I can just make up whatever all the time. And to me, there's like a really, which is actually, we're not there yet, but one of the talks I want to get into once we cover some more basics has to do with the relationality of gender and social, like the US government is a social construct. The concept of a president is a social construct. So, like, yeah, it's not real, but it also is real in a lot of ways and has very real implications. Um, so, that is also kind of a critique or a rebuttal to both, I would say, misuses of that idea of gender as a social contract, because in a way it is all invented and you can invent what your gender is, but the degree to which that invention is considered real in the world has to do with how much buy-in you get from the people in your life and from society. So that's the sort of relational aspect.
Can I speak to that? Okay, because you're really
Yeah.
speaking my language here. You're not overstimming me. You're perfectly talking right now. Okay, so this is what I would say as an astro radicalist. I didn't invent the gender that I'm sitting in right now, even though I put on all these performance tools to connote the gender. I think Jupiter hitting my Pisces moon at the 14th degree is inventing the gender I just put on because like I'm in a super femme space, just energetically, right? Like my feet are all highlighted. I got cool sandals on. You should see my goth sandals. They have skulls and crosses on them, and I'm just like walking around with my girly sandals on, and like I'm just doing all these psychic readings. I'm just like in the Pisces mode, right? And so the
Yeah.
energy of my chart created this gender first, and then I put on all these performative cues to show that feeling to you as I sit here, right? So I am
Yeah.
doing the performance of my chart right now. And then I think people are going to read the social cues I set up successfully as, oh, look, there's a girl, she's a girl, Andy's the femme in this equation. I mean, there can only be one, right?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. That could be. It's like Highlander, totally.
There's one
Um,
femme. No.
but
But I don't know, but I do think that I could have done it in a way where people didn't buy into it. They're like, no, that's not really feminine. Maybe in the chart that would have been a mixed aspect. Like I would have a Pisces moon square Mars in, Gemini or something like that. So I would have been a
yeah.
mixed aspect energetically, but I'm not.
Well, two really interesting things what you're saying. One is you're sort of pointing to the fact that the most high femme appearing people will actually have some type of significant Mars in their chart, which doesn't actually make it. I mean, we'd have to like look at a more specific example, but the presence of Mars doesn't necessarily make you more masculine. It brings the most, and this is why we're going to get into understanding like the base energies of the planets, because it's about like basically it gives you confidence. And if you're so yin and so feminine and so passive that you're just like shrinking in on yourself, you're not going to actually get seen as being that feminine or that sexy in a feminine way, because you can't embody your femininity in a confident way. Like you need a little touch of masculine in order to like really let that feminine shine.
Beautiful.
Same thing with like a man, like a really manly man who's going to be attractive um, to women, is going to have some feminine qualities and some feminine aspects to the way that they do their masculinity, which is really, I mean, in a way you can see like, at least for me, when I think of the most masculine men of all time, like super or whatever, like they're pretty gay because they're men who are for men who are about men and they want to do men and masculinity, and that's the whole thing. Man on man, that's gay. Man on man is gay, right? Like,
Well, and
so
it's interesting that the transiting Mars and Jupiter are conjunct in Gemini square my moon. So I am a little bit of a martial version of the Pisces moon, which I did more aggressively go femme than I normally do for this performance that we have today. So I hear you, and I
yeah,
think that's very
yeah.
astute. Okay. Well, I don't want
It's
to infringe on
oh
your
yeah.
class today. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're not at all. This is great. I also like what you were saying about the performance, and it's sort of like um the chart contains every planet and every sign, and then natally some of those things are then, emphasized or de-emphasized. But then, as you often like to point out, which I love, it's like the transits also kind of like, so you have the whole sky as a potentiality, and then there are things that make you more likely to have certain transits that are based on your natal chart. And then based on the cycle you're in and the transits you're experiencing, you might pull out different sort of configurations or versions of yourself that have sort of different gender expressions based on what transits you're doing. So it's kind of I like that analogy of sort of like putting an outfit on as a way to understand how transits uh kind of like put on different parts of your personality.
Yeah, and in
That's
this gender show, what I'll do is if I'm in a super masculine part of my personality, like my 28th degree is a total dude, I'll dress like that and show you. And you can, and then you have seen like my three spirits come out because like my 6 degrees femme, like I'm like a femme mask. So like I'll show you all those genders in this show.
yeah, I love it. It's
Okay.
great.
I hope you
All
show me
right.
your genders.
um I mean, I think the funny thing is that I have, in a day-to-day way, a pretty stable one. It doesn't do a lot of things. Um, but that's also something that I experienced. Like I have a strong fifth house, and I am, was a drag king and a performer. And for me, getting to sort of like make things is where I prefer my gender, if that makes sense. As opposed to like, I don't know, I'm sort of fixed in my kind of day-to-day way of being.
Perfect.
Um, but part of what allows me to do that and feel good about it is the fact that I already have it as like a creative outlet, and I don't feel like I need to do it in my daily life, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I mean, I suppose I'm also a trans person, so one could argue I'm constantly performing a gender, but I don't experience it differently.
Yeah, it's all
Just
interesting. I
different
mean,
feeling.
we
Yeah.
could, I don't know if you would get mad at us for noticing the fluctuations of your energetics on transits. Like we could, even if you keep the
Mm-hmm.
same gender performance cues, we could notice
Yeah.
like, whoa, you're really yang today, or like you're kind of yin on the, energetically. I mean, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
offensive to you, but am I allowed to talk about
No.
your, allowed to talk about your chart in this show, right?
Yes. Yes.
Like
Totally.
I would imagine transits to your Mars Uranus conjunction, we're gonna see like hyper masculine moments where you get kind of mad or like you get kind of like oh, like and then maybe when we have stuff going through the Pisces part of you, you'll be a softer version. You'll be more chill or whatever. So we might
Yeah.
point this out.
I mean, I definitely have like what I would say that it's less that it's angry and more that there's like a spike in intensity and like enthusiasm because again in the tropical chart we're talking about Sagittarius here, and that Jupiter co-ruling my tropical ascendant, so it's a very like enthusiastic, excited energy. And like even when I am, even my warrior self, which I definitely have, is not a like fight picker as much as it's a bully stander upper, like I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, you don't you pick on them. Like
Right.
that's kind of more my, like I'm like, that's not right, and I'm gonna stand up for what I think is right, and kind of think like that's where I can get that way.
Maybe
But
I'll
the rest
test
of the
you with an
time I don't want to.
inflammatory statement.
Yeah, try it.
I'll time that.
Yeah,
I'll time that. I know your chart. So
yeah. There you go. Exactly. Which wait, what was I gonna say about that? Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, like that what I was just saying about myself is sort of also true about how I see things in general, which is sort of like why I love to reference kind of being pro the binary, because there needs to be a fixed point for there to be a reference to. Like you're not saying anything about anything if the reference is everything and nothing. So like I like there to be a contrast in a context to provide the stage for what's happening. Like for example, before I transitioned medically and passed, I, unfortunately for me now, got to enjoy more sort of credit, if you will, about the masculinity that I was embodying because it was seen as masculinity on a female. Whereas now my masculinity is in reference to what people are perceiving as male. And so in that realm, I'm a much more feminine man than I was a masculine woman, if that makes sense.
yeah, totally. I
Which
actually think you're pretty
bummer, but
masculine.
thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not 6'10" and 100 million pounds and like, or what, like I'm not like a giant hairy dude or something. Like, I mean, I'm not that that's the only way to be masculine, but like I just mean there's some kind of like broad strokes that I'm not really
Do you know that
nailing.
I wrote my honors thesis in college on female masculinity? It was
I
on
didn't, that's amazing.
it was on drag kings, and I did all this research on drag kings, and when the drag kings in
Amazing.
New York were coming up, and when drag kings were kind of making had a renaissance or whatever. But I wish I could understand remember the title of it, but like it was 40 pages long, and I wrote all about female masculinity.
I love the end. Jack Halberstam shout out. It's great.
Oh
There's a book
yeah,
of that
yeah.
title, definitely influenced me as a teen. All right. So I made this little chart, which I was hoping to be able to see it and myself, but
That's so
we'll see.
Virgo of you.
I know. Well, the what's not Virgo of me is that I wanted to make it so much more presentable than this, but I settled for what I was capable of doing. So, um, I have here now down the side here. I have masculine, feminine, and then bigender or neutral. And then across the top, what I essentially have
That's the trinary.
the yeah, the trinary, exactly. That's hilarious, and I'm gonna get into that in a second too. Oh my god, sorry, I'm still laughing about trinary. And then at the top here, I essentially have a sort of a reinterpretation of the modes: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And the reason that I've chosen these is because what needs to be understood about the differences in all of these different genders that because there's basically 9 here, has to do with their relationality essentially. So um Mars and Venus are the most archetypically, it's the male of male, the feminine of feminine, like the most gendered of the pack. And then Mercury is the most bi-gender, or but it's experienced through, so okay, I should say what this is. So then across the top here, what we have is the first column is about differentiating, being separate, and being an individual. So the style of masculinity and femininity that Mars and Venus are doing are like, is very separate and sort of non-relational. And then with the type of gender that we're seeing in Leo, or excuse me, I mean, yes, also Leo and Cancer, but in the sun and in the moon is inherently relational. Like when you think of the sun and the moon, they're have a relationship to each other for one, as far as like the light and the reflector of the light. But they represent the balance mode of gender and sort of like relationality in terms of balance and in a separate together type of way. And then the third category is where we have the least sort of strength of gender in terms of like how strong the it's happening. And that's because instead of being separate together, they're blended and integrated together. So there's the least clear masculine and feminine polarity in this sort of farthest out category because they are integrated. And then they have, you know, like a flavor a little bit more one way. Like Jupiter is a sort of it's like it's in the masculine column, but it rules Sagittarius Pisces. It's all about expansion and like it's sort of like the pursuit of hold on, let me backtrack. Basically, like instead of like the way that Mars and Sun are very like active and like classically masculine, like in the world kind of thing, Jupiter does end up having sort of this active role, but it does so just because it wants to grow and expand. Like it's sort of like just by being itself, it has an influence. Whereas Mars is like, I have an influence because I mean to have an influence and I'm trying to have an influence, you know? Whereas like the dissolving, integrating nature of Jupiter sort of ends up causing this change, but it happens just because of its nature, which I'm not. Do you get what I'm saying? I know that wasn't
Yeah,
the most
okay,
clear, but
well, a few comments from my side, the fem side.
yes, yes,
So basically, I see what you're saying. Like the growth-oriented nature of Jupiter makes it kind of masculine or yang, but it's not martial yang like Mars, where it's not like warrior yang, like rawr. It's more like
mm-hmm.
wow, you know what I mean? Like, and so this is where, you know, we have more genders in astrology than just two because we have this nuanced nature. But I see exactly what you're saying with that, and maybe we could say that the Sag Jupiter is more masculine than a Jupiter in Pisces, right? Where it's like you could have a
Yes,
Pisces version of Jupiter, which is like spiritually expansive, whereas Jupiter and Sag is like expansive on the like, let's go traveling, let's go do this, let's do, you know? So I think
right,
that's cool that there's like a masculine and feminine version of that. May I also make a comment about the sun and moon?
yeah,
The sun and moon are literally yin and yang, and they wire the right and left eye, and so and they switch them in males and females. But it's like in the Cadeicus, which is the two snakes that travel down the staff of mankind, like in
oh
the
yeah,
medical documents, and so this is supposed to be like the sun eye and the moon eye, and they travel down, and one's yang and one's yin, and they're all in one human. So all of us would have both yang and yin lines going down, but some charts have a way yang line, like a sun in Aries would be a yang line. If a sun was in Pisces, we'd have kind of a yin yang line, you know. But then the moons are reflective yin line, so they actually do go together, you know, in a binary fashion
right,
to build one human. And I just wanted to just support you in saying that the sun is
yeah,
literally yang and the moon is literally yin, and we both have those lines.
yeah, exactly. And notably, it is not gray together. They are distinct. They're separate together. They're together. They work together. They balance off of each other, but they are also still like maintain their autonomy. You know, I think is really interesting because there's, you know, the moon has sort of like, you could say there are some masculine things about the moon and some feminine things about the sun. Like, you know, like the sun is life giving and like the moon is big and sorry, yes.
Oh, and I just think you're right that they do maintain their autonomy, and part of the reason for that is they come out on transits. So you'll have a transit to your sun, and then you'll have a transit to your moon, and they don't really happen at the same time unless you have a sun-moon conjunction or something like that, in which case your yin and yang lines themselves are just really aligned. But so yeah, we get to express our yang self sometimes, and then our yin self sometimes, and they're both true, you know.
Yeah, totally. The other thing I'll say is about the Pisces and Sag thing is they have different polarities. So that's that Jupiter principle as expressed through the positive polarity or expressed through the negative polarity. So, like with Pisces, it's more, the imagery is like the ocean, and like sort of being drawn in, and that's the negative part of the Jupiter. And then the positive is Sagittarius, which is a much more like a wildfire situation, which is much more active.
Interesting. So what do
Okay.
you mean by the polarity? Like, people might not know what that means, negative and positive.
Mm,
So it's like you don't mean
yeah,
bad and good, but like negative would be like sucking inward, and positive would be like it's like a vector of energy, like it's going inward, it's going
exactly.
outward. That's actually
Exactly.
really interesting about Pisces. It does suck up energy, whereas Sag pushes off, throws off energy. I never thought of that. That's really cool.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
The
So, and
professor
that's
strikes
why,
again.
and that's why, I'm pro the trinary or whatever. Just kidding. Pro binary. I mean, I'm mostly just saying that to be controversial, but it's sort of it's also true. But um, because what I'm talking about is that there is a positive active force and there is a negative a passive force or a receptive force, or like
Yeah.
that there are these things in the universe, and it's, to me, we have the most strongest ability to actually um, understand the complex detail of things by having rigid points that can stay, that are like goalposts basically,
Yeah.
to,
Well,
to do like reaction.
we're having a great conversation about gender, and it started with the binary of the sun is yang and the moon is yin, but now we're talking about this different gender of Jupiter and like how it's this different kind of yang. And like, so we started with the binary, but it would be like saying starting with two trees and growing a forest or growing a bunch of branches from two trees. It's not like we're just stopping at two tree trunks. We're like,
Right. Yeah, and that's what's interesting, and that's also part of like what this chart is starting to show. But um when you also think about, like, did I already say this? Like, astrology is like the math of philosophy. And that's why I love it, because I love both math and philosophy. But it's really, and that's also why I think people often, if they're not into astrology, think of astrology as like some weird niche thing, and it's like not serious and all these other things. But I mean, F them, but whatever. Um,
F
but
them. Just kidding.
it is actually, I mean, yes, it's mythology. Yes, it has so much like historic things that have to do with people's different cultures and all these different things. But at its most basic, why I love it, and why in all of my philosophical studies I have returned over and over and over and over again to astrology, is because what it does is offer a set of tools that allows you to do math with philosophy, which I think is amazing, and
Yeah,
I'm super into
I
it.
always call it a technical philosophy because people are like, it's a science, all of that. And I'm like, kind of, but it's its own animal, and yeah. So
Absolutely.
I'm there with.
So when we have the one, like a concept is sort of like a one, before it exists, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's a one before it exists, because one and zero are sort of the same in this way, meaning that they're like, it's everything and nothing at the same time. And in order for a concept to exist, it has to move into this two space, meaning it has to be in relationship to something. So again, this is why I'm like loving the fact that the binary needs to exist, because we have the two-ness. But what what the two-ness creates is, it goes from the everything nothing space to basically creating directionality or directions. It doesn't even create a point yet. We're still not in the realm of where a point has emerged yet at two. At two, we've just created a this way and a that way, which creates like a spectrum. And then at 3, that's the first emergent point of a something, because in order, the 3 is sort of like the one that is created from the 2, meaning it is the point that specifies where location wise it is on, in the directional line that we've created. And then when you move to 4, now we're adding dimension. So now we have 2 directional lines. We have one that's going this way and that way, and one that's going this way and that way. And now again, but in a way that's like also still an archetypical space.
So like Mars would be like on the yang side of the slider, and it would be going out like this. It'd be like, and then Jupiter would be like, or something like, it'd be like yang,
Yeah.
something like
Well,
that.
I mean, that's basically
This is groundbreaking. This scale is groundbreaking.
So like that's basically, so we're going back to this. Can you even see this? I don't know.
I like looking
So
at it.
like the right. So like with the masculine, we have like, we're starting with the masculine of masculine, and then we move into this sort of separate together relational kind of masculine with the sun and Leo, and then we go all the way out here to the Jupiter, where we're like not super gendery, but and then Venus is the most feminine of feminine, and then the moon is that relational, separate together, balance version. And then I decided we're going to talk about outer planets a different time, because I actually think people often skip over a lot of the big inner planet stuff before they, and that I think people should learn it first. But anyways,
the more episodes, the better.
Right. So then we have North Node over here, in the blended sort of feminine far out spectrum. And then as far as
I've never thought of the North Node as having a gender. So how did you decide on the feminine nature of the North Node?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I didn't make it up, but of all of the different things I have read about gender and astrology, that is something I got from the Vedic tradition. It's been a minute, so I don't know if I can remember all the specifics, but my reason for that is that what the North Node does is it's like the active feminine blended, meaning that it's pursuant of what it wants, but it consumes. So it's like an active intake, which makes it the masculine of feminine in a pure sort of polarity way. Does that make sense?
Okay, interesting. Fascinating.
And then the opposite being true of the South Node. Okay. And yeah, so then
So if people want more information on that, they can look in Vedic sources at the North Node. They could like Google North Node gender or something or other.
Yeah. I mean, I would Google Rahu to get the right results, but
okay, cool.
Just keyword wise, that's that they don't say North Node in Vedic stuff usually. Right. So, yeah. So, but I think the nodes are super important. The nodes are super important, and they sort of like, I mean, they don't have the strongest gender, which is why they're in this like far out here, I barely have a gender category. But they do still, like, they play very prominently in the charts of trans people, for example, and actually can have a ton to do with gender. Wow. For reasons that we should get into after I finish doing this, maybe. But so yeah. So then on the bigender sort of path here, like Gemini and Virgo are both ruled by Mercury, of course, and Mercury is truly bigender in that it's like it contains a duality. It's like two, like it has both things going on, but they're not necessarily blended. And then with Saturn, that's where you start to see a little bit more of that like relational. So like Saturn rules things like the old crone. It's sort of like the masculine leadership qualities of the feminine, like a wise older woman or like that kind of vibe, which, and again, I think I said this before, but like with Mercury is sort of your like trans girl placement or planet, and Saturn is more of a trans masculine, although both of them can play parts in both, but just archetypically speaking,
Mm.
it's sort of like, I mean, think about where Gemini is on the zodiac. It's like sandwiched in between the most feminine planet, excuse me, the most feminine um, ruled sign, which is Taurus, and then on the other side, the moon
Yeah,
in
okay, so
Cancer.
let's see what Vettius Valens, who lived 2,000 years ago, said
Yeah,
about Gemini really quick. He says, the twins are masculine and double-bodied. People born under Gemini are quite well-spoken by nature. Mercury's at home with the twins. Gemini, persons born in Gemini can present a womanish, feminized nature, yet also be a bit barren. So, like, I don't know, like, but I think it is
interesting,
very much
interesting.
like, is cerebral, like, you know, the term sapiosexual, right? Like, I think of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is there a gender that is sapio? Because I feel like that's Mercury. It's like you're
Yeah, I'm like Mercury. Yeah,
yeah, you're more mental than a gender. You know, it's like some people
yeah,
are masculine, some are feminine, some are just sapio. Like just like "Meow, meow," they're like a machine. You know.
100%. Yeah, and I mean, again, that's definitely why both Jupiter, which rules the sign opposite of Gemini, and opposite of Virgo, right? Um, both Jupiter and Mercury are in this, you know, either integrated or bi gender place, because both of them do actually have a lot more to do with like relating and math and numbers and intellect and knowledge and stuff that's like not particularly gendered or um not really about gender. It can be about relating, but like not so much in a like a romantic or sexual way. It's more about relating in a like teacher student way, or in a like, yeah, I mean teacher student,
It's like
very
playing
Jupiter
word
Mercury,
games.
right?
It's the gender of people playing Scrabble. That's not that's not that's not smashing, okay? You don't have to smash when you're playing. You know what smashing is.
Yeah.
I just learned this from my teenager. Apparently, a smash cake is when you build a cake of people you're gonna like bone or whatever. Um, but like, yeah, like
Oh,
you don't have
okay.
to smash Mercury, okay? You're just like
Yeah.
talking and like playing Scrabble and Boggle and like no, but like Valence talks about that. He talks about like Gemini is very like into playing games and mental activities and like
Right.
I think some things in life just aren't sexual classically. You know, and not that
Yeah.
gender is sexual classically, but I do think it does it connotes sexuality. It's your gender and your sexuality don't they're not like linked like you can unlink them like on Photoshop how you can unlink height and width. You can unlink gender
Right.
and sexuality, but they can also be linked in a way, you know.
Yeah. I well, if you think about the spectrum from like the farthest out planets to the closest in planets, the most highly gendered planets are the ones that are closest and could be said to be more closer to Earth or more corporeal or more physical, whereas the farther out planets are more spiritual. And like the more spiritual you get, the more that gender is like not really a, but it's kind of a moot point, or like,
Yeah, okay, so check this out. Okay, you go into the ancient rulerships, you can build a body formation. Okay, the sun at home in Leo rules the beating muscular heart. And there's a chakra, it's like the high heart. It comes out like this, right? So that's like the yang of a human, is like my heart's beating and I'm like moving around, okay? Then moon in Cancer is the water heart. There's water around the heart, there's water around the lungs, there's water around the stomach. And that's like the Cancer heart is like the water heart, right? So that's like the yin heart and they're equal beating hearts in the human, right? And then you go into like the rulership of like then it's Mercury and Mercury goes up into the throat and the middle body of Gemini of just like now we're in the throat and middle body and it's like it's not the heart but it's the throat of mankind, right? And then Venus goes up to like the taste buds and this and then Mars goes up and then when you get to Jupiter it rules the buoyant parts of the legs, so it's where we push up off of, and Saturn rules the hard bony parts of the leg where like the hips bones, the knees, the ankles, like so it's like those outer signs are not gendered. They're not near the heart of man. They're near the bones of man, which isn't really gendered. You know what I mean? Like like
Yeah.
if you're bony, or like if you're looking at the bones of a skeleton, you don't see a gender essentially.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right on. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting. Also, another thing you said made me think about how, like, if we're going to do the stereotype of like Mercury being the trans femme and Saturn being the trans masc, when you think about, um, like, I don't know, at least in my experience, there's a very high number of trans femme people who are like super intellectual or are into sort of mercurial things.
Interesting.
Um, and it also might not be the most uncommon thing in the world to find a trans masculine person who works really hard and like, you know, um, is like works in the trades or like is some kind of like businessy person, but also kind of a caretaker, like Saturn stuff, right?
I love
Like,
that you're calling Saturn trans masculine. That is so progressive and neo. Like, I love our show. Whoever's watching our show, don't you love our show?
yeah,
Jael
right?
show. This is the Jael show. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So there we got
My coffee matches
and
my
then
shirt. I just want you to know. My coffee matches my shirt.
that's I know you need a little more glitter in there though, maybe.
I know, dude.
Or a
I
little
do.
crinkle,
Glitter is
sprinkled glitter.
femme. Glitter's femme.
Yeah. I think the only thing I haven't mentioned, which basically we've already talked about though, is just this the South Node as the most blended. It's like it's in the integrated blended category, mutable category, where two becomes one, and it's also in the bigender category. So it's sort of like once we get to the South Node, we're really talking like there's just no it has no gender. It's like the no, the none. It's the everything and nothing kind of thing, which again is why you often see it playing a role in trans people. Like this is just off the top of my head, but for example, I know in Caitlyn Jenner's chart, she has a Mars South Node conjunction.
Oh.
And Mars South Node conjunction is a very common trans aspect.
That's interesting. Well, in the North Node,
But I mean,
medically, not to medicalize anybody, but medically speaking, the South, anything on the South Node, you have way less of that thing than normal. You like not that anything's normal, but like if we were taking, so like South
right.
Node, yeah, on something can make like lack of, so that would be like lack of testosterone or like, although I don't understand because wasn't Caitlyn Jenner like a pro tennis player or something like I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
runner. Wait, no, she was definitely a professional
Like
athlete. Now
why
I'm
is she
forgetting
so
what it was,
athletic?
but
Maybe.
actually, we should do a whole episode on her because I have looked at her chart before, and her chart is like very ripe with trans type things. But also, she's a really good example of another episode that I want to do, which has to do with who you're attracted to and how to see the difference between. So, like, one of the things that happens in sexuality that we don't really talk about that much is that you can be homosexual or heterosexual, but you can also have a sexuality that is either allo, like outside of you focused, or auto, which is like towards you focused.
Oh.
So, like, that creates that like a whole other layer of things. So, um, for example, like with Caitlyn Jenner, for example, she is a trans woman, but she also is attracted to women and has been married to a woman. And her sexuality is like towards women, but she also wants to be or identifies as a woman.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm like gonna get
This
canceled
is
for saying
thinking
wants to
medical
be, but
astrology
um,
I want to look at Mars conjunct the South Node in the medical astrology book. Not that we're
yeah,
medicalizing anyone, but I just want to see what she would say
no,
about the testosterone level in, because I would say it would be like, and it could be transit dependent. Like when Caitlyn Jenner had a transit to her Mars South Node, proper, maybe she wanted to get rid of all, she wanted to like purge testosterone from her form, you know, whereas when she had other transits, maybe she was celebrating her testosterone. Okay, like, okay, so South Node conjunct Mars, anemia, low iron, um, sex addiction or avoidance and extreme, accident prone, male erectile issues, karmic issues with male organs. That's the other thing you see is a lot of people getting
Yeah,
castrated when they have Mars conjunct the South Node, which would make sense on the
right,
surgical level of like getting
right.
your shit changed down there. It's like that would be like almost like a castration, medically speaking.
I,
And
I
it's,
mean, yeah,
I mean,
literally. Yeah.
the vasectomy is another one. Like if you're like a straight male, you might get a cut going on down there.
Mm-hmm.
Deficiency of male hormone. See, that's another one. Like Mars on the South Node is like
Right,
not an, or like the Mars is leaking out essentially from your form.
right.
And if
So
you're acting
another
martial,
thing,
you would feel like you're going backwards karmically because the North Node is taking you forward in this lifetime. So if you're acting martial, you're like, I'm going backwards, I'm not acting like myself. So there might be a development against the martial nature as the time goes on, you know?
yeah, totally. I mean, again, this is another reason why I've seen the nodes play a part in um gender, also when they are in like houses or signs that in your chart are talking a lot about gender. So, for example, the 4-10 polarity and the 9-4 relationship, because so in 410 we're talking about the moon's house and like the Saturn sort of like career Capricorn slash Cancer polarity, which does have to do with gender, but I also like any when signs are across from each other they have the same polarity. So that's why I actually look at the ninth house for like father, which I mean that's a whole, when we do the mental health issues one, we can look at mommy issues and daddy issues transits, or things, because I can definitely have a role in sexuality and gender and things. um but if you have nodes in 4, 9, or 10, especially depending on your gender and the direction they're going, that can be sort of like, I've lived many lifetimes in a certain gender, and now in this lifetime, I'm in a different one, which can mean wanting to change into that gender or away from the other one. Or like, I mean, again, you'd have to look at other factors to determine that part of it, but that's a really interesting sort of thing to look at too, with the nodal axis and then that like 4, 10, 9 thing.
Wow.
Um,
So can I tell you a story about Mars conjunct the North Node?
yeah,
Okay, so I had a partner for 5 years and long-haired butch when we were dating. Like I'm a tomboy
God
femme.
bless.
She was a long-haired butch, like butch AF, okay? Eventually she transitioned into an interdimensional space apparition. That's what she said.
Oh,
But she has
all right.
Neptune rising also. So she was like, I'm out of here.
That tracks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, she had Mars conjunct the North Node in Leo. Okay. And which Mars on the North Node expands the Mars. So she was born XX chromosomally. And when we were together, I remember she had a trend, like she had super big biceps because her Mars was in Leo. And you know, Leo rules the flanks and the bicep right here. And Mars on the North Node will expand. And so she had like super strong biceps. So she played metal guitar. She was like one of the strongest, like non-hormonal, not on hormones, like whatever. Okay. So one time, I know she was hot. Yeah. Okay, I'll show you a picture of her. Actually,
God, I love butches and long haired butches too. I
she
just
was
they're such a special,
she was
amazing.
the editor on the Valens anthology. We did all 9 books of Valens together. She's so hot. Come on, I gotta show you her picture. I'm so mad that I can't find it. But so I don't mean to take time doing this. But anyways, she had a transit to her Jupiter conjunct North Node. Jupiter went, or I mean, the Mars conjunct North Node. Jupiter went over it, and I literally have a Pisces moon, and I could see her aura. Her aura literally expanded biceps, and then all of a sudden, her biceps just grew. It was like the craziest thing I ever saw. I was just like, what?
Wow.
And that's like North Node shit. Is like it just
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that
Yeah.
was.
North Node's hungry. Arr.
I'm literally gonna find a picture.
I love it. Well, so okay, the one other thing in this little graph that I wanted to talk about is sort of like thinking about the gendered nature and correlations between these things and aspects, because that's the, you know, now that we've sort of talked about the gendered nature of the players, so to speak, the next
That's a
thing is to look at
brilliant
their interactions.
that's a brilliant chart, by the way. The fact that how you did that was it's really smart. Like, so just
Thank
want
you.
to shout out to that.
Appreciate it. I Yeah. So when we're talking about the most masculine of masculine and we're talking about Mars, we're talking about a square. Because when you think about a square, that is literally in the zodiac sign wise, you're going to see um, the opposite, basically opposite polarity interaction, right? Um, and then with the conjunction, um, both the sun and the moon are correlated to the conjunction because they're like working together, but they, well, yes, I don't know how to explain that word. And then the sextile is sort of the nature of Venus, because Venus wants to um, harmonize things, but it not a sextile, which is represented, or sorry, gosh, ugh. Venus is a sextile. Jupiter is a trine, because something that I've learned about trines that I think is really interesting, because they, when we talk about trines in Jupiter too, a lot of times we're talking about harmonizing something, but in my experience, the trines, it's not like an optional thing so much. Like the trine like needs you to work together. Like we're all on the same page here, you know, so like a trine is always going to be um things that share the same element. So they have a similarity, but they the trine wants, like the trine is going to make a blending happen basically. Um
Wait,
Whereas,
do you know that you're actually talking about the ancient rulership theory? This has been talked about. Like, okay, so I just quickly drew, I kind of messed up on here, but I quickly drew the rulership circle. Okay, here's the moon at home in Cancer. Here's the sun at home in Leo, the two hearts. Remember, we're
right,
talking about two hearts.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah, right.
Mars is in Aries is square the moon, and Mars in Scorpio is square the sun. Like Mars is the square aspect to sun and moon. So you're absolutely right about that. Is like there's a kind of like intensity to the square, which is a kind of masculine aspect. I never thought of that, but that's actually true in here. And then
Mm-hmm.
Venus would in Libra would be sextile the sun in Leo, and Venus in Taurus
Right.
sextile the moon in Cancer. So that is actually the sextile aspect, which is feminine, or like, good job. Good job. And then the trine would be, the moon
Yeah, yeah,
trine
totally.
Jupiter in Pisces, and then the sun trine Jupiter in Sag. This is actually theoretically correct.
Yep,
Good job.
exactly. Pretty cool stuff.
You're a really good
And I mean,
professor.
you think like well, you know, I think about these things as like it is, this is why I call it the math of philosophy, because like I'm, you know, I'm also a mechanic and a builder and things, and I want to know how things work. And um you know, like when you're working on a vehicle, for example, there's not like a part that just like is something sometimes and is something another times and it just is emergent, or no. Like a bolt has a job and a shape and a thing that it does and a place it goes, and like, you know, like things have sort of fixed ways of interacting with each other, and it's about understanding that and then adding up the complexity, like I was saying, like starting with the null of everything and then having 2 points and then having a line and then having multiple lines and then like building out the dimensions from there. um but yeah, so with Venus, we have the sextile because the Venus wants to cooperate, you know, because Venus is also like it's it has a perspective, you know, like everything in the differentiate separate individual category, which is Mars, Venus, and Mercury, all have a perspective. Whereas when you get a little farther out onto the other side of the spectrum, things are less, they're having a less of an individual perspective because it's about like blending everything into a new singular thing.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas on
Isn't it
the
because Jupiter and Saturn are farther out on the circle, that's why they're less gendered, because these inner planets are like the Sun, Moon, Venus, or Mercury, Venus, Mars are like the main gendered planets, and then we get into Jupiter and Saturn, which are these kind of like loosely gendered planets.
right, and the reason that they are that is because when you like, I think of everything as being fractal, right? Like, and actually, speaking of which, as a side note, um, the reason that astrology works isn't, in my opinion, like it doesn't even have to do with the fact that the planets, more than any other thing in the universe, exact some very specific type of force on us more than anything else we could study. What's useful about astrology and studying planets is that we live in a fractal universe. I could study microbiology and come up with a system that was similar to astrology and go that way about it. But like the point is that it's a fractal, as above, so below, right? On a scale that's so much larger and so much farther away from our life as human experience that we're able to get some objectivity about how the mechanics of the universe works in a way that makes it possible for us to have a perspective on our mechanics, because we're too close to our own mechanics. But when, if everything has an archetypically fractally similar, you know, like it's working like this here and it's working like this here and like, you know, then I think what happened with astrology is really just that the movement of the planets is like a nice size of scale that has enough objectivity for us to sort of like use that. And I mean, I do think that they're related. Like, I mean, I think there are ways that they, like, there are real influences, so to speak, but that's also just because everything, yeah, it's, I don't know, it's a fractal universe. Anyways, that's my point of that story.
Well,
But
I just want to say that I'm an astromechanic, and I actually see the human body as concrete as a mechanic sees a car. Like, yeah, there are fluctuations to the spirit, but it's mechanical. Like, it's always coming right in on time. Like my feet are swollen right now because I have the Jupiter hitting my moon in Pisces, and it's like my feet are
right,
swollen right on time. The machine is functioning right on time. Like, so it's like I actually
yeah,
do see humans as like a machine, and the reason to get these mechanics down is so that you can understand the machine, right? It's like that's what drives me crazy about people who think they know gender, but they don't understand there's a cyclical fluctuating element. I'm like, you don't know the first thing
right,
about the machine. Like I
right,
will tell you, like this car has like this car has three genders, this one has one, and like whatever, and this one cycles through or like this, and like it would just be like saying like this one has a catalytic converter and this one does not. Like I don't see it on a judgment level, I see it on a mechanical level, right? And like so
yes, yes, yeah, no, we're very much on the same page about that. And which is again why it's so important to understand why like Mars is associated with masculinity, because not because it is directly related to a certain kind of chromosomes or a certain kind of whatever. Like no, and in fact, like thinking that way is erroneous thinking about the nature of gender, and these things can reveal each other by studying them. Like Mars is extroversion. It's masculine because it's active and extro. Venus is feminine because it is intro and feminine, like because it's going, the energy direction is that way, you
well,
know?
one thing
So
I've learned
like,
today is that
and
masculine
again, like,
energy is a vector outward and feminine energy is a vector inward. Like pulling in is a
right,
feminine act, pushing out is a masculine act. If you guys watch the manifestation and gender video we did with Jay-Z, he talks about that where he's talking about manifestation theory, and he says the yang part of manifestation is to say like I want this, I want that, and then the yin part of manifestation is to sit there and wait for it to come to you. Like, so he actually talks about that, like pushing it out,
exactly,
letting it come in, pushing it out, and how you need both for
right,
manifestation theory. So,
exactly. And everybody's gender is both things. So it's like, and that's like, and then again with this chart, it's like the Mars in is the extra with no relationality in mind, just about being itself as an individual, and the Venus is the same way. Venus, so like when Venus wants something to happen, it's like, no, like I need you all to cooperate, and I like, but it's not neutral about whether or not you cooperate, you know, like it has a perspective, like I need you to get along, which is why the sextile is the thing, because it's also not super strong. Like Venus in its nature isn't really like, because that's the other thing about strength. Like we have, for strength we have Mars and Sun, and then you skip down here to the North Node is very like strong in strength, right? Whereas like Venus is and the Moon are more I don't want to say weak, but they're not like pushing out into the world. So like with the Sun, Moon, and Saturn in this sort of middle tier, and I mean also going back to, you know, Gemini, or sorry, Mercury being having a very much a perspective. Like when Mercury is involved as a mediator, it has a perspective and it has an agenda. Whereas like when you go all the way to the full end here of like South Node and talking about Jupiter and stuff, then we're getting into this area where it's like there isn't so much an individual perspective, because it's just going to blend into a brand new thing where the both separate parts are dissolved and there isn't separate parts anymore. And then in the middle, you get separate parts that are relating to each other. And so it's relational, but again, something stops being relational when it forges a new third thing, right?
Yeah. Okay, you ready? You ready? I found a picture of my
Yep.
my ex-wife. We never
Oh,
got married in chapel, but
heck
she did
yeah.
okay. But long
Sure,
haired witch.
whatever.
Very-
Oh, hubba hubba.
Dude, is she
Dang,
so
with that
hot? Sorry, I
smoky
should say
look.
they consider an interdimensional space apparition, but like all the Valens and
They
books were
they
edited by her Virgo.
hubba
Damn,
hubba. I'm telling you.
damn. Yeah, we would have been a power couple except for like her Virgo
Some,
son
some cuties.
was so shy that I was like a public figure and like she wouldn't let me like talk about her in public, and I was like, "You're really stressing me out." But anyway. All right, well, we got to call it for
Yeah,
today,
I
but
can see that. That makes sense.
Jael, this
Okay.
was phenomenal. I love your chart, and I guess we'll call this gender in astrology inner planets out to Saturn. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have any
Great.
idea when our topic is for next week?
Um, I'm open. I mean, I have a few ideas, but do you want to talk about, well, we could talk about houses or start to look at it. We could do a case study, or like talk more about like houses and signs,
You want to surprise
or
us? You want to surprise us?
sure, yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording. All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.